Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we will look at how we can read Excel files in Python Pandas along with how to use different parameters available. For quick reference, I have added Pandas Read Excel API reference from official documents website. I have it here for reference. This video will cover the most common parameters you will need to use. Loading an Excel file can be as easy as 2 lines of code, so it will be import pandas as pd, and then we just have to define a variable to hold the data frame. We're using df. You can use any other variable you want, but df is standard and I would suggest you to use it as well. So you would do is pd, so we imported pandas as pd dot read underscore excel. Then you can either give it the file name directly, or you can store the file name in a variable and then use that variable. Right, as before, if your file is in the same directory as your code is, you can just give it the file name, or if it's in a different directory, you will have to give it the full path. We give it the engine to use as openpyxl, and then we load it. So let's go ahead and load this file. Okay, so let's take a look at original Excel file, and let's also take a look at the head, or the first top rows of the data frame that is being loaded. So we use head function. We can leave it blank. The leaving it blank will give us top 5 rows, or if we put any specific number in there, it will show us that specific number of rows. Let me pull up the Excel file and we can see the actual data. Alright, so we can see here these are the columns from the actual Excel file, and this is the data frame it has loaded. So you can see invoice ID, branch, city, so on and so forth. Alright, so right off the bat we can see that it did not load this column properly. That is because Pandas by default tries to guess all of the data frame columns and it converts it to that type by default. In this case, it has converted this column automatically to integer and it has removed the leading zeros. The dates look okay. We can check the types of the columns loaded by doing df.dtypes. We can see here that it hasn't loaded the invoice ID as integer 64. This should be loaded as a string, which is represented by object. So float is the decimal number. Data type date time represents date time, so we can see that the date column has been loaded as a date time, which is correct. The time is being loaded as a string because the time is not in a format that pandas recognizes or it can work with. Okay, it is also important to recognize here that pandas has loaded up the first worksheet that is found in the Excel file, even though it has 2 different worksheets in the Excel file. If we want it to load a specific Excel worksheet, we will have to give it worksheet name. What we are going to do is we will give the sheet name. This is very important if we have multiple sheets in there and we wanted to load the correct sheet. So we give the sheet name here, and the third parameter we need to use is dtypes equals, you pass in a dictionary, you give it the column name, you give it the data type you want it to load in. So let's run this again. Let me close this file. Let's run this again. Okay, so it's loaded. Let's check head. Right, so we can see here that the data frame is retaining the leading zeros, and we can double check it by doing the dtypes again. You can see here that the invoice ID column is now loaded as an object string. So if it's loaded as a string, it will not remove the leading zeros. It's important to note that the object column could be a column with all of the data as string type in it, or it could have mixed data type in there. It will also be presented by an object, because the Python pandas will not be able to assign one specific data type to it, so it will force it to convert it to an object data type. So let's say that we have an Excel file in which we have some of the top rows missing. How can we load it? Let me pull up the Excel file so we can see it. Right, so this is the Excel file. As you can see here, that it has top two rows missing, and the data actually starts from row 3. Let's try loading this in data frame like we normally did above, and see how does it loads it. Let me comment this out for now. Right, so we have created a new data frame, but under the variable df underscore skip rows. So we have done the same thing, pd.read underscore excel. We have given it the worksheet name, Excel file name, we've given engine, and we have done dot head to check the top 3 rows. As you can see here that it has loaded all of them as unnamed columns, and the first row is empty. So in Excel terms, this is the first row, this is the second row, and the actual data starts from third row. We can either drop these 2 rows and convert this row to actual data frame header, or we can use skip rows parameter to drop these 2 rows while loading the data. That would be much easier. Let's do that. Let me uncomment this, and let me comment this section out. So we need to skip the top 2 rows, so this row and this row. So this row will automatically convert to header, and the data will start from this row. Let's do that and see if it's being loaded correctly. Okay, we can see here that it's loading correctly with the correct column header and the correct data starting from row 0. So you will come across situations where you don't want to load all of the columns, or you have a lot of columns in the Excel file and you don't want to load all of those. You can specify the columns. You can do that by using either the column names or the column letters that are coming from Excel. So let's say we just want to load in 2 columns. That will be invoice ID and city name. So we can either give it column names, exact column names, or we can give it the column letters from Excel. Let's try both of these. So if you want to give the column letters, we can either pass in 2 different columns with a comma, or if you want a list of columns, you can use a column. Let's try both. Okay, so we only specified column A and C, so comma represents AND, so it only loaded two columns. We wanted to load series of columns or multiple columns, then we just change it to colon sign, and it will load all of those columns from A through column C. Let's say if you don't want to use the column letters, because sometimes what will happen is you might add new columns to your Excel data file, and if you're using column letters, then it will start loading up the incorrect columns because it's based on column letter. A specific column might move to some other column. So a better way would be to use the actual column names. You can do that by giving it the exact column names in curly brackets separated by a comma. So let's load these 3 columns: invoice ID, gender, and third column is city. Alright, so you can see here that we loaded 3 columns and it did load those 3 columns properly. Alright, that's it for this tutorial on how to load in the Excel file and do the most basic tasks in it. I will be creating many more such videos in future, so stay tuned for those, and I will see you next time. Thank you.